Hi, everyone. I think we're just gonna start. So, from tasty food to tasty typography. Welcome to, oh, that UI looks dope. Wish it wasn't so hard to read though, in which I'm trying to explain like what challenges typography faces in video games and how to overcome them. So, hi, I'm Henni. I'm a game developer and I'm first and foremost, like my profession is, I'm working as a web developer. I studied to being a graphic designer. I'm also a type designer, and I do games on the side and also write music for those games. So, and I think it's like good custom to show a little bit of what I'm doing. So here's a little bit of my print stuff. I started with print and the physical medium, and books are really great. The first one was about creatives in Seoul during the pandemic, and the other one is my bachelor thesis, which a lot of what I'm talking about today is based on. You can download the PDF of that on the website that is QR coded up there. As you can see, I like to make personal, like you can't see that from those pictures, but I like to do personal games and game experience. And as you can see, I have a propensity for like 3D and playing around with typography, and I think that's gonna come into play. The one on the right, on the top, that just released this week, and it's like a nice experimental 10-minute game. You should check it out, but you don't have to. So, like typography is facing a few unique challenges that you don't face in a book and that you don't face in a movie. So, and the main issue that typography is facing is that we have all those beautiful graphics and we don't want to like cover the beautiful graphics with text. So how did people like deal with this? There's like a few ways that like are established, and during my bachelor thesis I try to catalog and categorize them. So I'm showing you like those categories in the order that I like of how often I encountered them. So the first one are text boxes. Text boxes are great because they create a border. So that means your text has a background which you have complete control over, because the main issue with like text and games is that the game is moving, and that makes it very difficult to have the text in a position where it's always readable. In a book you have complete control over that, in a game you don't. A text box helps you to distinguish the background from your text, and yeah, this is from Zelda Breath of the Wild. And another thing that I would say is like typical for a text box is it's always appearing in the same position, and that is great because when you start a new paragraph, your players don't have to search for where the text appears. They know it's always gonna be there, and that makes it quick, because we want to create as less friction as possible, because while people are generally good at reading, it's just if there are like minor frictions, over time this is becoming tiring. So, and we want to avoid that to keep the players engaged in our stories. As you can see, a text box doesn't always have to be at the bottom, can also be up there. And another great thing about text boxes is you can use them to enhance the game world, like make it topically fitting, like with those ornaments in Hollow Knight. Or you could go like really analog and like in this indie game, 10 Meter Child, where they did all those, is it crocheting? I think it's crocheting or knitting, but it's kind of a really cool way to distinguish it and have it like be really unique. The next one that I encountered in regards to how often I saw it in games used during the last 10 years is the subtitle. The subtitle has the advantage that it doesn't take up a lot of your graphic real estate. It's not like infringing on the graphics. The way that it's like put there is often you either like have like these outlines, or if you want to go like really 90s, you can go for this yellow color with like a little bit of drop shadow that surprisingly is like covering most of the cases that you run into like in any moving image situation. Yeah. Sekiro, I don't like Sekiro's subtitles because the line length is far too long. Like imagine looking at this in front of your like large screen and then you have to move your head. It's not really good. Another way to distinguish is like having these like, it's not really a text box, but it's text box adjacent, so you have a bit more control over the background. Another issue that I find with subtitles and text boxes is you create a separation between the game world and the narrative world. So I don't know if you've ever watched a movie in a language that you don't understand. I feel like when I'm doing this, my eyes are glued to the subtitles and the whatever's going on screen, and is just like background noise. I just notices as ambience because I'm focused on reading. And I think that's also the difference between subtitles and text boxes, because in text boxes, the game action is kind of slowing down. There's not much happening. Oftentimes it's just like a repeating animation, and subtitles are used more often like if there's like a lot of action going on. And I feel like, especially with subtitles, you are kind of forced to decide what you're going to focus on. And it's not like that they're bad, it's just like something that is also happening. And with all those display versions, it's more like you have to decide on what are you okay with, like what kind of negatives are you okay with incorporating. The third most used version to display dialogue is speech bubbles. And I do like speech bubbles because they introduce a spatial element with the what are they called? Subtitles. And the text boxes, the issue is that most of the time they appear in the same space. Like with streaming, we see a bit more of speech, like subtitles being sorted like right underneath the speaker. But in a game where the player has control, it's really difficult to make that work. But a text box, sorry, not a text box, a speech bubble, it implies like who is speaking, and even though I think like the speech bubble in Kentucky Route Zero is like a little bit large, the text is a little bit long, it's more of a novel style than it is a dialogue, but you can read the text, but at the same time you kind of perceive more of the game world, so it kind of keeps you in there. Or a more recent example, 1000 Times Resist, that I think did it really beautiful. But an issue with speech bubbles is that you don't know where the next like line will appear, because if it's not the same person speaking, it can be on the other side of the screen. So you're losing a few milliseconds of concentration to find the new box. I still think that 1000 Times Resist did a really good job at this, because as you can see in this image, you really see a lot of the game world with 1000 Times Resist's quirky style. But they also have this really cool choice wheel that you can only pick a choice, while like when I played it with a controller, you have to do like the joystick movement to select one, and then only you can press accept. So that way you're never have this issue where it's like clicking through the text and accidentally selecting an answer. But that is beyond the point. I think it's just cool. That's the one that I encountered the least. It might be that it's getting a bit more since Disco Elysium, but yeah, a text log is probably one of the older ways to display dialogue from the 90s CRPGs. And what I think that the text log introduces is the element of time. Because with all the other ones, you only see the sentence that is spoken at that moment. But with a text log, you can compare it to what was said before. So you always have context, and if you have difficulty like sometimes understanding what is it, like I don't get this sentence, and you can scroll up and just understand like, oh, what is it referring to. Apart from that, it has similar issues to the text box. You have a separation between game world and narrative world. You have the advantage of having full control over the background, which, as you can see, like they picked a rather like regular sized font. So, but it does look like really fine, because there's nothing in the background that is like kind of distracting. So it has those advantages and disadvantages. Those are more out there. This is from a game that I did, where the text is not happening on like the 2D space, but it's actually projected inside the game. And I really like the idea of playing around with text in-game, because it keeps the game world and the narrative world together. But it is very difficult to make it work, because you, like, if the player has control over the camera, you have to make sure that it's not clipping into the earth, or that it's always facing the camera. So it is more difficult to make it work, but it can be a really cool narrative tool. The game that I published this week is, I think, doing that in an interesting way. So if you're interested, check it out. And like, essentially, this is text boxes, but what a lot of visual novels sometimes the visual novels do interesting stuff with animations and text boxes. So this is a game by Snack, who was doing a talk earlier this morning, and that is kind of a moment where things are falling apart, and I really like how the animation of those text boxes just underlines that. Here's an overview. I'm not gonna go through this, but I'm gonna post this somewhere later, so you can use it as a referral. What is it called? A sheet, maybe? Maybe it's a referral sheet. So, now that we have figured out where we place our text, now we need to figure out how to make it work in a game. And we could start by the opposite question, like, what is making text hard to read in a game? So let's start. For example, the letters are too small. If the text is too small, you have to squint your eyes, and it's like difficult to read, and it's no fun. Another one is that the lines are too long. The theory behind that is, like, when you have a book, it's normally like a certain size, and you can keep your head in one position. But with a screen, they're oftentimes large enough that you have to move your head from left to right in order to see everything that is happening on screen. And if your text is covering the whole width of the screen, you are forcing your players to move their head. And over time, this is gonna be tiring for them. And if they're tired, they're getting slower while reading, and maybe they stop playing for that day, which is probably also okay. Another issue is that letters could be too narrow. So there's like this theory that we're not really reading the letter shapes, but that we're reading the negative space in and around the letters. So if your letters are narrow, you create less negative space, and that makes it more difficult to read. Another issue could be text transforms, like uppercase, italics, or monospaced, because people are just not used to reading uppercase text all the time. Another issue could be display fonts. Display fonts are great, but if you put a display font somewhere where they were like for like a lot of text, then that is getting that brings its own issues. I'm going to go into it in a minute. That is also playing into display fonts, high stroke contrast, which is creating like this flickering text image, and that is also tiring over time. Another issue could be letters that are easy to mix up. So an example would be the word Illinois, because you have an uppercase I, and then you have two lowercase L's. And if your font does not distinguish them, it kind of looks like it's three uppercase I's. So that is just, one example. So your font should have letters that are easy to distinguish. Another issue could be color, which is, if your font, for example, is like a bright red, that is kind of aggressive, and maybe it's fine for a few words, but if this is happening all your game long, it's going to be like really aggressive and tiring. So color can be an issue. And the other issue is contrast between the text and the background, which is I guess, like if the background and the text are too close in brightness, it's getting difficult to read. If there's like too much movement in image behind, then it's also difficult. So contrast is a big thing. So how do we solve this? So typography is a craft that is mainly learning to see. This means I'm trying to show you like those details that you can look out for that over time will create a smoother reading experience. But on the other hand, you will also notice these things more like all over the place. So it can drive you mad. So if you don't want to, you can leave. Please don't leave. Stay. So let's look into a little bit of those, like a few of those details, how to make text work better. And let's start with some reading theory. So from when we're reading, I guess our imagination is that we are just like reading letter by letter, and that is kind of forming our words, because that is kind of how it feels. But what it is actually more like is that our eye is kind of doing like screenshots of like small clusters, because we can't read the whole text. We don't perceive it like that. We just perceive like small fractions. So when we're reading, we do this screenshot, and then our mind from the screenshot goes through kind of like a dictionary of like, it could be these kind, like this letter combination could be these kind of words, and in the context of that, like the position of that sentence, it would make sense if it's that word. And then you go through this, and maybe at some point when you come across something where you feel, from the screenshots that you made, your mind cannot pick something from the dictionary that's fitting, then it asks your eyes to please go back and can we look at this like a little bit more in detail, and then you kind of jump back and then you can form like the dictionary entry that you wanted to have. And what we are aiming for is having not that many of those jump back points. And we have a number of tools that I listed here. So we can use letter spacing, font size, line length, and all those things to make this dream come true. But there's also something that we probably don't always have control over, which is the writing itself. Like if it's very complicated, with a lot of like complicated words, your readers will have a slower reading tempo, and there's not much that you can do. You can just make it as comfortable as possible. So let's look at the first one, and it's already a difficult one, font choice. So picking the right font is something that you can't decide like on a general basis. It is really a use case basis. So one font can be great for a display. It might not look good in like a body text. It can be maybe that it's not fitting the theme of your game and it's kind of feeling foreign if you pick, for example, like a very angular font and you put it into your fantasy game and it's kind of feeling a little bit too techy for fantasy. The next thing that you can consider is the stroke contrast. This is the difference between the vertical strokes and the horizontal ones. As you can see, this font up here has a very high stroke contrast. So the vertical ones are like leagues bigger than the horizontal ones. So it's really great for a display, but in a body text situation, it will be more difficult to use. Another one is font weight. That is, kind of need a font that is complex enough to have different weights to even consider that. But if you're looking for a font to display your long dialogue, it's worth looking for a font that is like very like sturdy and it's a workhorse font. So let's look into stroke contrast. The letter combination doesn't mean anything. It's just, especially with the lowercase n and e, you can distinguish like what kind of the rest of the font will look like. That's why I picked those. And if you have to decide like which of those two fonts would you like more, then like my personal choice would probably be the left-hand one, because the details just look more interesting. The other one looks like a little bit, I don't know, doesn't look that interesting. But in a body text situation, you can notice that these details kind of become kind of an issue because it's making the text look blotchy. It's a bit mean because the left-hand font has a lot of details. But I think it's still illustrating because they're the same font family. The right-hand one just looks cleaner. It just looks like it's not that much like stuff that is distracting you. It's like, okay, relax, just read, everything's good. Let's do it again with this time without a serif font. I guess you can guess that the right one is more suitable for body text because it has less details, even if it has details, because the N, that is kind of fancy. But as you can see, it looks so much more calm on the right-hand side than it does on the left-hand side. So that is what I mean by stroke contrast. If they are more even, it's more suitable for body text. If the contrast is higher, it's really great for a display font or for a display situation. And next one, font weight. So let's assume we don't have or let's say, if we have a background in a monocolor, preferably white, then we can go for a regular sized font, which is like probably this or this, and would be totally fine because we have control for the background. But the more noise we have in our background, the more we need the font to fight for attention. And one way to do this is by picking a bolder font. And as you can see, there's like, it's really difficult in some of those situations to read this. And like even with the bolder one, it's still difficult. So it's more like if you don't want to have like a background, and then maybe go for a bolder font choice. This also goes in the opposite direction. Because I had that in mind, and this was a game that I worked on in January, like a spy visual novel. I decided that I should do a custom font for this, which was a choice. And here you can see like how the font looked like in the very beginning, and I decided like I should make it a little bit bolder than I would do it normally, because this time it's made for a game. But I underestimated that we're just having like a monocolored background, and I felt it looked like too bold. And if your font is too bold, it's also getting tiring because it's just too much like letter information that you need to take in. So I decided to make a little bit smaller, and I think overall this made for a much more pleasant experience. So next one is font size. Font size is very difficult to determine like in concrete numbers. Like a lot of this is just in relation to whatever is like, give me a moment. It's font size depends on the medium that you're displaying it on. If you have a book, you have complete control over the medium because everyone is getting the same book in the same size. If you have a game, you have no clue what the person that is playing your game is playing it on. It could be a Steam Deck. It could be a 27-inch monitor, or it could be a projector. And you don't know how far away they sit. The closer they sit, they might need to move their head more because they can't see everything. But if it's like on a small screen, then it's different again. So font size is really difficult. So something that I think should be available more often is like a UI scaling option, and Godot is providing one. And I think it's like a really cool tool to provide for those different screens. The next one that we have for making text better, like easier to read on screen, is line height and letter spacing. Normally when you pick a font and you put it into your game, it's probably like 100% line height, and it will look okay in most situations. But what is happening with a font and increasing the font size is that each letter has a little bit of white space around it. And if you make the letter larger, that white space is also increasing. And now that you have a large letter with more white space, it kind of starts to fall apart. And that is why, as a rule of thumb, the larger your font size gets, the more you should reduce the line height, and you could also reduce the letter spacing to keep up that effect of like screenshotting like a cluster of letters. Because if it's too large and the letters just have the original letter spacing, you just perceive less letters in one eye screenshot. The opposite is also true. The smaller your font size gets, the more you can increase the line height and the letter spacing, because it's just, even though like in percent it's the same white space, it's just less pixels. So you, as like The larger, the smaller the fonts, the larger the font size, the smaller the line height and letter spacing, and the smaller the font size, the larger the line height and letter spacing as a rule of thumb. So combining fonts, you can combine like different fonts, but it is more of a stylistic question. What I want to show here is that picking different font weights can do interesting things. So on the left-hand side, I think you can see that even though like the large headline and the footnote, they are like far apart in font size, but they kind of look even, and that is because I picked a smaller font weight for a large one and a thicker one for the really small ones, and that is kind of creating a harmony that it looks like they're all kind of similar-ish, even though it's still visible that one of them is really large. But you can also use this in the opposite direction, just go for a really bold font for in a big size. We should also decrease the letter spacing to keep it closer together. And if you do it for like a really small font at like on the bottom, and use a light font weight, what it is creating is a hierarchy. So the bold font is telling you, read me first, I'm important. And at the bottom, the footnote is, if you ignore me, it's fine. I'm just here if you want to check me out. A bit about text transforms. I would suggest using text transforms as a way to emphasize text. If you do your whole dialogue in uppercase, it's tiring to read because the rhythm of the lowercase letters is just something that we are more used to in reading. And it's also like you're yelling at your players all the time. Slanted or italic, it's kind of similar. In tests that they did, they showed like it's possible to read it at a similar speed, but over time, people are getting a bit slower with italic because they are not used to it. Monospaced is really cool, but you can't see as many letters with one like eye screenshot. So as you can see, like with the one on the right, is it? Yeah, it's right-hand side on yours. On the right-hand side, I fit a lot more letters into the regular proportional spaced font than I'm able to with the monospaced. So monospaced should be more a stylistic choice than a choice for your body text. Next one is dyslexia. So I need to drink something. So I'm not dyslexic, so I'm not sure I get everything right, but I think the theory behind these dyslexic fonts is that I think dyslexic people don't read in these clusters. They read more like letter per letter. And there's also the issue that sometimes they mix up letters. And what dyslexia as a font is doing is Open Dyslexic. I don't know what the other one was called, but yeah, what these dyslexic fonts do is try to distinguish each letter. They try to emphasize the bottom, which is why the ears has so much like black at the bottom to create this kind of line while reading. And it's stretching the space between letters to slow down how fast people can read it. And there were tests done on dyslexic elementary school pupils, and they were able to show that these dyslexic fonts helped the kids read faster in comparison to a normal Times New Roman. But what they then did is they adjusted the Times New Roman font to have similar proportions to the dyslexic font, which meant they increased the spacing between the letters and they increase the X height, which is like the lowercase letter height. As you can see, I tried to simulate this here. This is like how it is normally, and then I try to adjust it to make it similar to this one. And what the tests were able to show is that with those adjustments, there was no significant difference between a dyslexic font and a regular one. And why I'm telling this, or why I want to highlight this, is if you have a dyslexic option in your game, and for example you have a very serious steampunk noir game, then having all your text in Open Dyslexic, it might crash your tone. And the good news is you can accommodate for dyslexic people with those adjustments while still keeping your visual identity intact. So waiting for Godot. I tried Unity before, and I worked with Unreal, and I tried to make fonts work in all of them. And it is very tedious, and especially as a type designer, it was very frustrating because you can't even get kerning running if you don't do some very deprecated font tables that like no one else knows to do, and like even in the font software, it's not. I just found out in a forum they said like, yeah, you have to type it in. It's not an option in the menu, but it does work if you type it in. And when I used Godot for the first time and I saw the font documentation, it was, that is so great. Look what they can do. You can do like kerning works right out of the gate. You can get like open type features, and just the list is, it's so great. Yeah, let me show you a few of those things. So, font variations. You can use font variations. Font variations are if the font provides like variations to a letter. So let me show this. So this is a font of mine, and if you want to see if your font supports this, you can put it to Font Gauntlet, and then at the bottom left-hand side, you have a list of all the font features that this font has. So for example, this font has an alternative lowercase a. And if I want to use this, I can activate it in Godot. I could also use the old style figures, which are the lowercase ones, which is really cool. And the other engines don't have that option at all, so it's really cool. Next one, I don't know, it's not the next one, it's just more of an illustration of what can be done with font variations. And as a note, you can't do like this to a font. It has to be provided by the font. It's just something that if it's a font that has these things programmed into, you can activate it with Godot, but you can't make, for example, round or circular, circular dots into square ones, but if the font provides it, you can activate it. You can also work with variable fonts. Variable fonts are a font file where you have like the smallest font size and the boldest font size all in one, and it just interpolates, and you can pick everything in between. And the cool thing is that you can tween it. And it's like a little bit more difficult than a normal tween because you also have to update it via the text server manager. But it's pretty cool. I'm gonna show you like, yeah. So if I'm selecting one, let's focus on this. When I'm selecting it, it looks like it's the same width than the ones with the smaller font size, but it's actually not. It's a light one, and it's just tweening between those like really smoothly. And And maybe to show this in a more like, because that was really fast, something like this is possible. Like you can switch between a serif and a sans serif very smoothly. Stuff like that is possible with Godot. That is UI scaling that was mentioning before. I would like to see it more often in games because it's just such a cool option to just scale the whole UI. You can limit how much you can scale it, so you have control over that. It's not like looking bad at one of those screens, but it allows people with different screens and different reading needs to adjust it to their needs. UI theme and type variation is more like a ease of use, maybe? Instead of like designing everything one by one, you can just create a theme, define all the buttons and all that, and it's just going to be there. So you can even create variations of that. For example, like have a button that is like round and then have one that is square, all in the same theme. And if you put that theme as your project default theme, you can select it in the, what is it called? What's it on the next page? No. The type variation, it's just below the theme. And you can just select it from the drop-down. If it's not your default theme, you have to type in the name, but it's also working. And maybe a little bit about type foundries. I think most people are used to going for Google fonts because, yeah, it's free and it's a large resource. The issue is that a lot of people are using it. So your game will look less unique if you go for fonts that a lot of people are using. So here are a few fonts that I like. Velveteen is great if you're looking for headline fonts that are very conceptual. Flint type is just a collection of fonts by non-male type designers, because as in every industry, the work of man is just getting more coverage than it, like, of every other gender. Fonts in use is something that I want to mention. Like, if you saw a game and you liked the font in it, you can type in the name of the game, and oftentimes you can find the name of the font that has been used in case you want to use it as well. And the one at the bottom, that's my own type foundry. All the fonts that you saw in this presentation were made by me, and you can use them as well. And if it's for a student project, you can use them for free. And if it's a trans-related project, you can use them for free as well. Just send me a little line. So thank you, and I think we have like 5 minutes for questions.
First of all, I'm quite late to the talk, but I think I catched one slide that was interesting to me regarding the canvas scale and different screen sizes. I recently tried to do a little thing in Godot. I wanted to do, or I did a simple calculator, and I got like really stressed out. Why was it so small in my viewport? Why was it so small on my screen? And then what I did in the end is like just increase the font size, because like the container wasn't getting any bigger because the font was that small, so the container did not scale up. And what I found really like frustrating, there's no control node or whatever that like takes the thing that you have inside it and like scales it proportionally to whatever it has available. And I wanted to know if there's anything that you can like do on a per like node or container level to have that effect, because it's like really annoying to adjust the font size for everything, or you have to increase the sprite scale or whatever, and then you basically don't have a single slider where you can do anything.
I can't say that much about the technical side. I think like if you're setting your options like with a canvas item that is expanding, if you have a different screen size, it will adjust to it. But if what you're looking for is like that when you increase the font size somewhere, it is also increasing elsewhere, you would probably need to set up like a function that is writing over the theme where you have like the default font size and then just increase that default font size and have like a percentual calculator. But I think during development, I don't think that there is an option to just scale it to what you want.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I thought that was, Godot's options are quite limited when it comes to dynamic UI and stuff. But yeah, that's at least my feeling of it. But thank you for answering me.
In the back? Was there someone? Yeah, I know, but there was someone in the back. No?
Me, I came down.
Oh, you came down.
Thanks for the talk. My question is regarding accessibility settings, which are coming up in more and more games, which is great. And you talked about different settings for fonts in the beginning. Do you have recommendations or rule of thumbs for which settings to expose to users, or maybe which you definitely shouldn't expose to users for accessibility?
So I think that the UI scaling is one that I recommend because it's easy to do and it's already solving a lot of problems. Like when people have difficulties reading the font size, they can just adjust the whole thing, and if you have like scrollable containers, it will still be navigatable. Apart from that, like if you have this dyslexic option, I think that is great, but it would mean in this case that you need to overwrite, like not just like add a new font. It would be easy. I think you don't need to like add a new font file. You just add a new font trace. So that has like these adjustments that I was describing earlier with wider letter spacing, because that can all be saved within the type variation. So I think that could be something. And apart from that, maybe it depends like on the display version. If you have something where the background is moving, maybe an option to add a background. So yeah.
Thank you very much for your time. Professionally, I have worked with educational materials that have to be translated to multiple languages, and a sentence or paragraph in English might be 1 or 2 lines, while translated into French or Spanish can be a whole book. Do you have any recommendations how to handle that for better typography?
So I think if you're doing something for a language that you're not proficient in, it would be good to have another person look over it. Apart from that, if you're doing like something with French to another language where it's like still a Latin script, I would just try to make sure that your text box size is large enough or can like scale up so that it can fit all of that text. If it has apostrophes, like most modern fonts just are designed well enough for that, but maybe something to consider is that if you have a language that has a lot of apostrophes like Vietnamese or French, that there is enough space above the lowercase letters so that they don't that they're not too small, because they're important and should be easy to read. But I think those decisions, like if you don't know it, it would be good to ask someone who is reading that that is able to read that. And apart from that, just make sure that you have enough space. It can sometimes be difficult, but yeah, or make it so that you split the text box, add a continue button. Sometimes if it's, for example, you're limited to 2 lines, then you have to add an option to make the other line visible or something like that.
Okay, thank you very much.
We have time for one question.
Thank you. I really appreciated this talk because I think it gives a lot of small details to tweak with text and fonts that help make it more legible. But I also there was a lot of static text or text that stays in one place. So I was very curious. I had, for example, in a previous project, text that scrolls on your screen, kind of like a news segment. And I was wondering if there are any rule or thumbs for such dynamic text or text that moves around, or any of these rules that change based on that.
I once did a scrolling credit screen, and I had this issue that it was looking like it was stuttering, and I think you need to adjust the scroll tempo to the refresh rate. That is something that people in the film industry know how to do. I don't know, but that could be something like synchronizing the refresh rate, and for example, if you turn the text like it is, if it would be like it's on the left-hand side, something that you would do there is probably make the spacing between letters a little bit larger. And if you have text that is running, I think that could be something that you could do as well, add a little bit more spacing, because then the eye has a better chance of getting the cluster of letters that it needs to decipher it. But if it's too close, just in the regular size, might not be able to perceive them. Yeah, but moving text is always difficult.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If you have questions, you can come here or write to me on Discord later. Thank you.